And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game from Alderac Entertainment. We're going to take a look at Courtier, which is, I believe, the first game in the Tempest line of games, a set of games that all takes place in the same universe. Now, this is a card game essentially with a board in which players are vying to take control of different circles, different guilds within the royal court of Tempest, because the queen is soon to be arrested, and whoever holds power will obviously be able to get a good position after she's been arrested. So, real quick, we'll take a look at how the game plays, what you get inside the box, and then we'll come back here and we'll get my final opinions on Courtier. So here you can see a game of Courtier set up for 3 players. Each player has these 15 influence markers that they're going to be using to place influence out on the board to influence different people from different circles, or coteries as they're called in the game, and these are called courtiers. Now, the objective is to get control of specific people on the board in order to fulfill agenda cards. They're going to be public agenda cards. For example, this one says that if you control the prince and the palatine and the painter, you can remove all of your influence from all 3 of them in order to score this card, which is worth 11 points. So you're trying to get your influence out here in order to control people, and in order to control someone, you have to have more markers on there than anyone else, and it has to be completely full. So simply, if green has 3 out here, they don't control the palatine, or he doesn't count for control because he'd have to be full. So once gray places a marker here, or if white, which is neutral, happens to get a marker out on the board, he would now be controlled, especially since white always counts for control of whoever the active player is. So you're trying to control different people by placing markers out on the board. In order to do this, you're going to be playing cards from these 2 decks. You have the influence and power decks. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to make up a hand of 5 cards from these decks, choosing how many cards from each deck they want to draw. So maybe it's 2 from the power deck and 3 from the influence deck. And they'll put this hand out face up, and the players will be bidding on these hands. So it'll be a number of hands equal to the number of players. And they'll bid on them with their influence markers, which they're going to lose back to the supply for winning. So, for example, the player might bid 1 on this, and they may get outbid by 2, at which point they can rebid. And you're going to go around the table until everyone has bid and hasn't been outbid, and then players will pick up the appropriate hand that they won and return the markers to the supply. After this, you're going to be taking turns. And based on how this works, basically on your turn you have one of 3 options. You can either play a card from your hand, either power or influence. You can choose to discard cards from your hand, or you can take one of the influence markers from the general stock into your personal reserve. That is your 3 options on your turn. Now, at the end of your turn, you're always going to draw up to 5 cards. So that's the benefit of discarding. If you don't like your hand, you can choose to discard a bunch of cards and draw back up, but you basically forfeit a turn. On your turn, as I said, you're going to be playing cards, and these cards, you're going to try and be getting influence on the board. So a lot of the time, you're going to be playing influence cards. These cards have different types of influence. So, for example, this one allows you to specifically influence the Queen's Oath, which is a guy over here in the military area. This one says you can influence anyone in the Guild of Commerce, which happens to be over here. So you can choose who over here you would like to influence. And this one here simply allows you to influence anyone. It's a wild card. Now, in addition to this, not only are you trying to influence specific people in order to score these agenda cards, and you have one secret agenda that no one knows what you're trying to score, but in addition to that, having the most influence markers in any one of these different coteries, or guilds, whatever you want to call them, is going to give you an ability. Each one of these areas, when you have the most markers there, so if I had 3 here and no one else was there, I'd have the most. Each one of these is going to give you an ability. So, for example, the Senate is that you scored 10 points at the end of the game if you control the Senate. The royal family prevents other people from moving your influence markers around, which they can do with power cards. The minister can actually replace any one other single person on the board for the purposes of scoring an agenda. And the church allows you to actually, when you play an influence card, double the effect of that card, so you can place more influence out. The commerce area here says that you can pay an influence token to place an influence token somewhere out on the board. So you can pay one back to the stock and place another one out on the board. Or the Athenaeum here says that you can, before you refill your hand, discard 1 card from your hand. So it allows you to discard every turn instead of having to choose that as your action. So each one of the areas has their own effects. Military makes the power cards better, or some of them better, and culture gives you a victory point each turn. So if you control these different areas, you can actually advance yourself in the game faster by using different strategies. Now, as I said, you can either play an influence card, when you're playing a card, or you can play a power card, and these power cards have different abilities on them. For example, this one here just straight up scores you 3 points, which you would mark on this track. This next one here says that you can spend an influence marker in order to use this card as somebody from the church for the purposes of scoring an agenda card. So that's a different way to get maybe a guy that you can't control, but still score a card and not lose influence markers from the board when you do it. When you play these, they're going to go out into a discard pile. And when you draw, you can either choose to draw the top card of these decks for free, or you can choose to pay an influence marker to pick the first face-up card from these areas here. So there's a chance that you can know what card you're picking up, but you have to pay an influence marker back to the general stock and pick that card up, at which point it would be replaced with another card, and you can choose to do that again if you're not yet at your hand limit of 5. Now, when you do have the control of different guys out on the board, in order to score one of these cards, you're going to do that at the end of your turn. After you've done your action, you'll score one of these cards, and when you do so, you'll take it and you'll place it face down in your own area as it's scored. You don't mark it on the score track, you get those points at the end of the game. But after you've done this, you're going to flip one of these fashion cards up, and these are basically the timer for the game. It's a stack of 13 cards, and somewhere in the bottom half is a card that ends the game. But when you flip one of these up, you'll see here that it has an effect. So not only are you going to remove your control markers from the board, which may change the control of different areas, which cards you get to keep and which you don't, but it also says here that you fill all empty spaces in the Athenaeum, the church, and the culture coteries with neutral markers. So this card would resolve, and anywhere that's empty in the Athenaeum, the church, and the culture is going to fill up with a white cube. So you can see how these white cubes would come out, and they're going to influence the control of different areas because whoever's the active player controls all white cubes on the board, which could be really good for trying to score different agendas out here. Now, you'll also flip out a new agenda, and then you'll continue play in the same manner. But the influence will have changed because you'll have removed markers from the board and added some likely because of these fashion cards. Now, as I said, at some point in this deck, there is a fashion card called The Queen is Arrested, and when this flips up, the game ends immediately. At that point, you're going to combine all of your points from the completed agenda cards you have, points you've earned through the game through the play of power cards, and whoever controls the Senate card will get 10 points, and whoever has the most points through all of this will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Courtier from Philip DeBerry and AEG. Now, Philip is a well-established designer who has done successful games in the past. He had Revolution, and I believe he did Kingdom of Solomon as well. So he's already had a couple successful games, and this is his first submission through AEG, and it's nice to see AEG getting into Euros. Now, this is a pretty light game for my tastes, but I think it's a good game. It combines some interesting mechanics with the moving of influence, the fact that you need to get influence on certain people in order to score points and control areas, but in order to control an area, you have to have a lot of influence there, and in order to score points, you have to remove influence. So as you remove influence to score points, you're going to lose some of your abilities, which will slow you down, and I think that's an interesting balance to maintain. As I said, it's a little light for my tastes, but I think that there's a whole group of gamers out there who will really enjoy this style. I certainly wouldn't shy away from suggesting it, so if that sounds good to you, check out Courtier from Philip DeBerry and AEG.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.